Hello everyone, I'm Susan Lee MacDonald and welcome back to my show, The Interview. Today, I'm here at the beautiful dating museum in northern Seoul, ready to interview Troika. Now, Troika is made up of 3 amazing artists who use incredible types of media for their experimental and very interesting art. I'm really looking forward to meeting this trio of artists, and I can't wait to find out all about their philosophy and thoughts behind all the work that they do. So join me today for the interview.
Three things that are namely not necessarily compatible, but that combine together to form something greater.
There is a really intense dialogue with the material, and that is important, and just that our materials are others.
Well, we're not really people who tell people what to think, we sort of put it out there.
Well, I would like to welcome you all to the interview. It's such a pleasure to have Troika with me on my show today. Hi, everyone.
Very nice to meet you.
So tell me about Troika. 1 handsome man, 2 beautiful women. What is Troika, and could you introduce yourselves to me?
Well, we're 3 artists, and I'm Conny Freyer. I was born in Germany, and I met Sebastien and Eva in London.
Okay.
I'm Sebastien, Noel, and I'm from France originally, and we met, as Conny said, at the Royal College of Art in London, where we studied, and started this collective about like 10 years ago now.
My name is Eva Rucki, and I'm the 3rd Troika.
Great. So Troika, it reminds me of something very ancient. Like, it's not a word that we commonly use these days, but could you explain to me how you came up with the word Troika for your artist collaborative group?
Well, it's fairly simple. We're 3, so that's the first basic kind of meaning that we attach to it. But as you know, the word has come from Russian, and it's like a 3 horses cart. So it's like 3 different kind of entities that are pulling in the same direction. You could see it like that. Of course, if we expand a little bit more on the type of work we're doing and the motivation behind the work, it'll be fairly apparent why we use this kind of word that is kind of reminiscent of Trinity, or 3 things that are namely not necessarily compatible, but that combine together to form something greater.
Wonderful. So Troika has been together for how long now?
About 10 years, but then again we also studied together, and we were close during our studies. So actually we collaborated on various projects, and so all in all we've known each other since 13 years now.
So quite a long time for friends to have worked together. I mean, would you all consider each other friends and family, or just simply colleagues?
Definitely family.
Yeah, at that time, you know, like we're not like colleagues is like a very strange term, right? It's much more something that you use like in a kind of professional sphere. We have an incredible chance of being, you know, like artists, so we can call ourselves whatever we want. Friends is definitely a good term.
Great. So 3 friends get together in college and then decide to work together on various projects. I'm assuming just for school projects maybe, and then there was some spark that just ignited for you all to work together kind of professionally, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Kind of developed quite organically. I think we just sort of figured out that we were really quite interested in the same things, ways of, I don't know, just how you look at life in general, the things you notice, the thoughts you share with each other, and the ideas that grow out of that.
I think at a first instance that's probably a thing that happens in the everyday. Like we get excited about very similar things. Someone will point out something that the other is immediately going to react to and will spark something. And I think that's the first start, because we met as friends, we didn't meet as collaborators.
So being based in London, now you find yourselves here for this exhibition, and you've been preparing for this exhibition for quite some time, yes?
Yeah, I think about a year, and some of the works, or sort of the first sort of sparks for the work, stayed back even longer. I think maybe even 2 years ago. I think a lot of our work is sort of, in a way, layer upon layer upon layer. You know, it continuously informs itself and evolves further. But for this specific show, yes, I would say about a year.
Now, for those of the audience members that may not be familiar with your work, how would you describe your artwork, and specifically what we're going to see with your exhibition here?
I mean, for a start, we work in a lot of different media. So that can be drawings, that can be sculptures, that can be sort of more installation works that might or might not use light, for instance. Some sculptures, they also move, so they have kinetic elements in it. So it's very extremely varied in terms of media. But all these pieces are tied together with a very sort of, or a particular conceptual approach.
And do you all collaborate with each of the projects that you work on, or is there usually one project that one person spearheads and then it kind of balances out with the other project?
No, I think that's the premises of, remember you asked about Troika, that is also that. It's like we chose specifically to explore how you work with 3 people, in the sense that there's no single person that is going to come with an idea, develop it, and that's it. Or like a kind of role division in the way we are doing things. We are like really working together from you know all the time basically. So like idea sparks generally individually. It's like one of us would come back and say, hey guys, I have an idea, why don't we do something like that? But of course they're informed by many discussions we've had before, and it's very difficult to trace back who said what first. You know, it's a bit like the chicken and the egg problem in a way. So and it's similar for like when we refine a piece of work on them, we all work, you know, like together, and that is very interesting to us, because it enables you to. I think maybe I'm talking for Conny and Eva, but they can give you their view on that. It enables you to go beyond like kind of a duality. You know, if you work with 2 people, it's often either black or white. People can go into like dichotomies very easily, whereas if you are 3, there's often a very surprising position, because you say black, white, and somebody will come back with pink, or another kind of strand, and that keeps the dynamic very interesting and fluid.
Well, I am so curious to get a personal tour of your exhibition from the 3 of you, because this is something that a lot of our viewers definitely want to be able to look at through your eyes. So if I may have the pleasure of your leading me through the tour, I would absolutely love it.
Sure.
No, fantastic. Okay.
Sure.
Wow.
So
What is this?
An installation that's based on the little object that you see rotating over here.
Okay.
It's called an electroprobe.
Electroprobe.
Yeah. So essentially, it's a microphone that's picking up all magnetic radiation of objects.
Oh, so as it's circling, it's picking up the
magnetic fields, you know?
Now, how did you decide to put all these different kinds of electronics together? Like, a lot of them look like older.
Well, essentially, they're all like an object that you can find in an everyday kind of house, right? It's like all things that you're surrounded by every day, like a computer, telephones, anything that you see, DVD player, like a Game Boy or things like that.
And of course, some are older than others,
Yeah.
but we deliberately wanted to include some older objects as well.
Where am I now?
You're in a white room with falling light.
Falling light.
You can see that there's a little arm with an LED that is moving back and forth in front of the lens.
I see.
And that creates those expanding circle or dots of light. And because you control the kind of way it falls down, you can give this impression of a raindrop. And what we were like trying to explore is like, and something that you can see threaded in our work is like, how can you create like things that are like merging the kind of mechanical, the scientific, and the very natural, the the organic, how this can be combined together instead of being seen as opposites.
Wow, this is so beautiful. This is really magical here. Wow.
Yeah, this is arcades, or sometimes we call it suspension of disbelief.
But this is a flat surface, so how is this actually curving?
Aha, that's the magic.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Wow.
Those are Fresnel lenses. So
What type of lenses?
Fresnel lenses.
Fresnel lenses.
They're flat lenses, basically.
Okay.
And there's a lot of work that we do that is a kind of also informed by the, experiments and things like that. And we've been playing a lot with optics. And at one point, we, by chance, found a kind of arrangement that gives you the illusion of curving light. That's the nature of the piece. You have like a phenomenon, that's why we call it suspension of disbelief. It's like you have a phenomenon that you know is not possible. It's like obviously it's illusory, but then you put it, this is like from science and this is from religion, put it together. It's like a question about like which like kind of belief model you want to follow.
It almost feels like a very lovely, like sacred space because a lot of times we associate the arcs with a kind of a religious or spiritual venue.
Right. So how can you create that kind of space with like very technological items? For instance, you have like a xenon arc light that has super precise discharge of little lighting bolt inside capsules. Inside of that, it's like all need to be very precisely aligned, precisely made. And there's definitely a lot of kind of, I don't want to say mathematical, but nearly mathematical rigor within that thing that we hope contrasts with exactly the kind of space you described.
Wonderful.
It's like a space for spirituality.
Oh my gosh, wow. This is amazing. What is this called? Persistent illusion?
That's right, yeah.
Wow.
It's like a big fountain of rope.
Wow. And how is this operated? Do you have like a levy system underneath or something?
Yeah, essentially you have like a motor that is catapulting the rope at very high speed. And it follows this kind of same trajectory that the water would do, or a projectile would do, or anything. So you can kind of create that illusion of water-like thing with a very non-watery element like rope.
And I'm curious why it's called persistent illusion. Because you're never seeing the same thing twice?
No, persistent illusion is a kind of, it doesn't go together, right? You can't have an illusion, this one really needs to sit. You can't have an illusion that is like persistent, right? Normally an illusion is like a momentary thing.
I'm Eva Rucki, I'm a member of Troika. You're watching The Interview.
So out of curiosity, the three of you being artists, you must have had some really amazing skills back when you were children, that someone said, you know, she's really good at painting, or he's really good at visuals, or something that someone had said to you, or was it just by chance that you decided to go to an art school?
Wow, nobody has ever asked that question.
I think curiosity. For me, that's one of the main factors. I was really like very curious about the world that's around you, why things are like that, what you know, why is, you know, taking things apart, looking how they're made, going around, fishing, you know.
Did you draw when you were a kid?
Yeah. You know.
What did you draw when you were a child?
Like super complicated drawing with like thousands of layers of detail that my mom was wondering if I was autistic or something.
The autism has worn off in the meantime.
Autism has worn off in the meantime. No, but no, I guess it's like, and it's at least for me, it's the same reason where I've been like looking at lots of different, you know, different things together before settling on what we are doing now.
How about you, Conny?
I'm probably the only artistic person in my family. My grandma used to draw a lot, and I was always drawing and painting since I'm 3-4 years old, always.
And were you fascinated by a certain kind of painting style? Did you?
No, I mean, as a kid, you don't think about style. You just draw what you see or what you don't see. There's no style to it. But I did go quite early on, from when I was about 10 years old, sort of afternoon schools, like drawing, not classes. It was more like one man taking lots of kids around, and we went to the forest and to the village and just drew things.
And this is in Germany?
That's in Germany.
I see. And was there someone in particular who also wanted you to nurture that? Or did you feel free to be able to do your art as a child?
Very much so. I mean, I grew up in East Germany, so there were always a lot of afternoon activities for the kids, because both parents would normally work. So you would go home around 7 o'clock in the evening, so the whole afternoon there was always stuff going on. And I guess my art teacher, when I was in 3rd grade or something, said, yeah, I'll take you to this man, and there are other kids going there, and do you want to come? And so she was probably sort of the first one that did something with what I liked, or sort of took me to this person.
Interesting. Wow. And how about you, Eva? Was art in your childhood, or is it recent?
Yeah, there was a lot of things. I mean, my dad was a teacher, and he is teaching an interesting combination of religion, art, and literature. And because he was a teacher, we would travel a lot in the summer months. And what I was mainly known for in my family was collecting all sorts of stuff. So normally not nice things, but just things that lie on the street. And so I wasn't drawing that much. I was just like making things from bits and pieces that I had collected from God knows where. My parents had this amazing big attic where I would be most of the time with where you could do plaster, there was a workbench and all of that, so it was just,
So
it was
in your attic you had plaster and a workbench? Just for, that's not pretty typical.
No,
in my attic we had like old paintbrushes and stuff, but...
Yeah, was a lot of that. I'm just from quite a big family in a big house, so there was just this attic where my dad would build things and I would help him do that, so that was always part of it.
Well, it sounds like the three of you definitely have had a lot of artistic talent that was recognized as a child. But what do you think it is that keeps you kind of doing this? And at what point does your passion for art, does it stay a passion or does it ever become a job?
But that means it's outside yourself, right?
Yeah.
This is not a thing outside us. This is 24 hours a day, maybe with a bit of sleep in between. But it's like
that's a way of living. It's like if it become a job, you know, that, you know, I don't know what I would do. It's like, you know, it cannot become a job. If it become a job, I would change. You know.
I don't know. It's just that you get so much back from it. You know, you travel, you meet through exhibition and through your work and through residencies. So many interesting things. And that's just almost alongside it. It's just a really interesting way of life. You constantly learn new things. There's no day that you do the same, and I personally really enjoy that.
And I think that is the thing that keeps it alive, no?
Do you feel I don't know if you mentioned that before, but I think one thing that definitely binds us together is sort of curiosity about the world, how it's made, how things, I don't know, are done, work, how they look to other people, or what they see in them. So we do have the habit of approaching people.
Now, since we're talking a little bit about the artwork, and of course, right behind the two of you, we have the two amazing kind of paintings. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of having made that? Because it seems like, was it 50,000 volts? How many volts is it?
It depends on, this one is 15,000 volt, but we have like different ones, you know, like different, basically what we're doing is like we capturing the powers of electricity going through the paper. So it's a bit like catching a lightning bolt as it goes through. And what interests us a lot in there is several things. One of them is like it creates a very natural organic pattern, like very fractal. And you can see that for us, like the metaphor is very interesting because essentially the electricity will follow what is called the path of least resistance. It goes where it's easier to go. And this is the same thing than the river or the vein that you have in your body or the root of a tree.
Sure.
So nature goes by its very essence where it's easy, which is the absolute contrary of what normally we do as human beings. We control, we build, we force, we bend, we hammer things into position. So when you're doing those drawings, what is really fascinating in the process is like, hey, of course, it's very dangerous, so you're very respectful, you know, towards what you're doing. But it's also like a kind of constant dialogue between what you're trying to do, which is like to control it, and what it does, which is whatever it wants to do.
As you are creating this, are you also thinking of these people's theories as you do this, or is it just out of your curiosity to see how light will interact with paper?
Well, I guess it's like you can't separate the two things. It's like one thing. We work a lot with like a hypothesis and, you know, experiment. So like we set aside like something like that this could be possible. The first one we made like burst into flames and nearly burned the studio down. That's fine. But little by little you manage to create that for us. But again, it's like it's both in the process and the result that it's interesting us. You know, it's like how do you work with technology to create something that is eminently natural. How do you work with technology in a kind of irrational or more subjective way? So it's not pre-planned, so it's not like I want to reach a result, I'm going there.
You're not trying to control it.
You
controlling it on some
inevitably
level,
will try to control
yeah.
it. Like this is our very essence of being
but
human.
we're trying to be aware of
you,
how much we're controlling.
You are aware. It becomes much more like again, it's much more dialogue with the tool rather than an imposition.
But actually, when you're talking about the slow processes, that's certainly true. But I think it's we're setting something up, or maybe a system, or setup up, framework in some ways. For example, like with the labyrinth here, which you see, and in that sense, as we're building this labyrinth, which is almost like an architectural model. It has only one entrance and only one exit, and then we put a piece of paper into it, which is what you see behind you on the wall. And there's a paraffin candle which is placed underneath it. And in our mind, yes, hot air has to expand, so it has to find its way through the labyrinth. But then there's so much what happens that we actually, that you can't predict, all this sort of side effects. And that's actually the really interesting part, you know, everything that happens outside of that equation is a sort of side effect of it, and that's what is really interesting.
I'm Sebastien Noel, I'm one of the members of Troika, and you're watching the INNERview.
So aside from what we're seeing here, you've done some other works that have been really well received by the public, and Cloud seems like a really fascinating project that you have created for the Heathrow Airport, is that right?
Yeah.
Can someone maybe tell me a little bit about Cloud?
Cloud is a beautiful big volume that is covered in what some people call flip discs, and they're small sort of circular discs that flip from one side to another.
Is that like at the train station when you see the
That's right.
trains?
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and they make a very beautiful sort of flipping sound, especially if you have lots of them. And yeah, so we created a sculpture that is covered in nearly 5,000 of these flip discs. So you have to imagine a volume that is sculptural but somehow fluid and animated.
Now, you were commissioned by Heathrow to do this, or?
No,
Yeah.
we were commissioned by curators called Artwise Curators, and this was for British Airways.
I see.
So like the main commissioner was British Airways, and the curators basically does the interface with like artists and things like that.
Now, did they come to you and say, hey, we want a cloud, but you decide how it's going to be?
No, they are wonderful curator that came to us and say, hey, this is the space, do you want to do something there? And this is a pretty unique position for which they obviously took, this was the first large-scale kind of sculpture that we made, and this was back then quite, like, it's technically quite complex, so it can be like seen as quite challenging. And the curators were like absolutely fantastic, and we became like very, very close friends.
So every single flip disk is able to be changed depending on how you program.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for the cloud in Heathrow Terminal 5, we created a custom sort of animation loop, which is about 10-15 minutes long, which is really derived from the sort of specific shape of the sculpture, completely sort of tailor-made. It was very different from sort of a screen. It has very specific arrangement.
Because it's three-dimensional.
Flip discs.
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it before, and I'm curious what kind of message you were trying to convey as you were making this.
Actually, we were quite interested in a way, obsolescent materials, because these flip discs are something which is deemed sort of not useful anymore.
These things were like,
yeah,
this is a futuristic thing at some point, and that value changes in a very short amount of time.
But also, you should not restrict it to the technical element. I mean, I know that it's the easy thing that to, you know, like to eat at because it's what you see. But in effect, when you're really in front of the piece, you see like a kind of very heavy fat volume, like heavy, suspended in midair, so floating with a shimmering skin that is going around and floating. It's like at this stage, at this particular point in time, you're not asking yourself about the flip disc component, you know, it's like it transcends that, and that I hope like the piece has that sculptural quality as well, that is imbued within it.
We had 8 months to make it, and we were in our small studio in Brixton, our first studio. We had a fabricator that helped us to build it. We had a big space, so we could actually make it. So it was a very intense period. It was only 3 of us with 1 assistant helping us. And you're in your shell, and then eventually you spend day in, day out, and nights overnight in Heathrow Airport installing this thing with lots of people. And I guess the biggest not the biggest reward, but a really nice element of that is then to see how people receive it in the end. And the first reaction is, of course, the people who help to install it, the workers. So the award, of course, is part of that, but just to see the reactions of people towards your piece.
Why do you think people had that kind of reaction to seeing that piece? Do you think it's because they've never seen something like that before, or is it because it just looks so massive and yet so graceful at the same time? What do you think it is?
I think it's all of it. Yes, and I do think there is also this, that you just don't know what you're looking at. It's and there is this. It's quite an interesting piece in terms of scale and what happens when you come closer. Because when you're far away, you do think that you know what you're seeing. And as you get closer and closer, it constantly changes in a way its manifestation. So first it looks as if it's light-based, you get closer, you hear the sound, then you get closer again and it seems to be alive and moving. It's,
I mean, public places or spaces are really tricky arenas to make art for, because you want to make a statement and you want to express yourself. So you create this work, but then it's not in a white box. It's not in an isolated space. And I don't think we try to predict what happens. But there's always this element of how will people actually live with this thing? How will they experience it? And that you never know beforehand. That is always only something that comes into sort of being once you have installed the sculpture.
That said, there is like one thing, you know, like this piece is still like if you look, you know, like in the kind of golden book, like you know, like the kind of feedback book in like the first class lounges, something that, or in the forum, is like for the passenger, the people that really travel with that or pass in front of the sculpture on an everyday basis. It seems that they really love it. You know, like there's a lot of content, and there's the kind of ownership towards it. Like they request, you know, like it to be like clean properly, like, oh, this is dust on it, this is, you know, it's not good, things like that. And that, I think, is like, for me, after like a few years, you know, like it's still the best award to me, because that means that there's something that transcends, you know, like the kind of technological feat, you know, like people are used to like seeing, like, I mean, you go in the street of Seoul, you see amazing LED algorithm that makes seem that the thing is curved, where it's totally flat, you know, when they scroll those LED and it seems that it's circular. Or like there's loads of things, like we're getting really used to having this kind of spectacle of technology, but to have like, and usually that doesn't last very long. It lasts until the next spectacle. Is a very addictive kind of pattern, and to have this kind of feedback several 6 years after or something like that, for me that's like that make me very happy and proud and maybe in a small way. You know what I mean?
Yes. I'm curious what children's reactions are when they see it.
I think adults are even better. Like I was taking the escalator a couple of months ago, and then someone sort of did this and said, "That's the cloud." And I was like, "I know.
I built it."
Yeah, it's funny.
It seems that you work with a lot of different material, from wood and smoke and metal and electricity and light, and I really liked the project Light Rain. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Light Rain was a work that really came into being out of an experiment. It was an experiment with lenses and white light. And what we realized so in the studio, in the workshop, was that in actual fact when you project a white light through a certain lens, which is called Fresnel lens, it sort of splits in all the colors of the rainbow. And we found that really, really fascinating, that something so everyday can just contain such a poetry or just be so unexpected. And then the second thing we realized when we were playing with it was when you move that white light away and further towards the lens, you get this projection, this light projection, that sort of grows in diameter and becomes small again. And as we were sort of moving it, we just sort of saw it as a continuum rather than like sort of two different instances, small and big. And we realized that it has a sort of natural movement of like a raindrop of water. So we were quite inspired by the idea that a light was also a medium that almost were also responding to gravity. So it would in a way sort of go from the ceiling to the floor in the same way than any other material is, even though it's kind of immaterial and nobody knows what it really is. And out of that sort of experiment, Light Rain came into being. And that was installed for the first time in Shanghai during the World Expo. We were working with an architect called Thomas Hasewick, and it was a really, really, really long path, about I think 100 meters. Really.
Now, this third project that sounds really fascinating is the square and the circle. And apparently only from the front can you see the circle and the square, but from the side it looks very different. Like, explain to me, it's a little kind of blowing my mind to kind of hear about this.
Kind of like that. We've been recently working on a body of work or different sculptures that are concerned with the idea of truth, or how do we build our own reality, what do we consider truth. And all these sculptures, and Squaring the Circle is one of them, sort of plays with the idea with looking at something and not quite knowing what the object actually is. So this particular sculpture is a suspended ring, suspended in a space.
Like a hula hoop?
Like a hula hoop. Exactly like a hula hoop. Except it's black.
I like things really simple.
It's a black hula hoop.
And if you want, from one side, the suspended sculpture looks like a suspended hoop. And from the other side, it looks like a perfect square. Now, how we showed the piece in our solo exhibition last year was with a mirror hung behind the sculpture. So on entering the room, you see the suspended circle, and of course you see your own reflection in the mirror. But rather than seeing the suspended circle or ring in the mirror, you see the perfect square.
How did you come up with this idea?
Like loads of things.
Long years of thoughts and
No,
discussions.
it's actually quite playful. It's like it's a whole, like it's like a reference to like the several different things. If you look like the way we understand the world, like if you go down and down and down at matter, like in quantum physics and things like that, things are often like very opposite. You know, like they can be a wave or they can be a particle. They can be very, very different in essence, but yet they are the same thing. And if you look how you approach your, you know, like our daily life, we also have this preponderance of, you know, antagonistic things. You have like people that would like refer to science or to religion, or even within different religion they fight against each other. But they exactly, or if you look at the essence, or if there is a possible unity, very often you'll see that they're talking about the same things. Or is there a possibility of you know, like going beyond those antagonism and bring them to some place that is united? And I guess like the sculpture is talking about that, and is also referencing a very old problem, which is a mathematical problem that was described like thousands of years ago, about squaring a circle. Can you trace a square that is the same area than the circle? The problem doesn't matter, the solution is impossible. However, with that sculpture, if you start to take another point of view, if you move, you're going to understand how this is possible. And it's possible because it takes on a third dimension.
I'm quite interested by the limits of what we're able to perceive because of the limitation of our senses in a way. So we were, I mean, obviously everything that we see is only by reflection of light.
Sure.
So in a way we were trying to find a way to open that sculpture up for different type, that it has a sort of a third nature almost, where these sort of two opposites can be reconciled. Something which you know can't be possible is still sort of proven to you because you see it with your own eyes. That it's there. So we're quite interested in sort of questioning what you are told that's impossible, and this will make you, I guess, reconsider how sure you actually can or should be of what you think you know.
It sounds to me that you all explore so many different philosophical and scientific concepts that a lot of people have been kind of debating about for quite some time, but now with a lot of scientific research and quantum physics in particular, and also just knowing what is the visible within like our spectrum of light versus like what is actually in existence. We see just like a tiny fraction of what is actually out there, and it sounds like you are posing questions not only when you're creating this work, but also forcing and allowing the viewer to kind of question those things as well. Is that part of the purpose in making this square in the circle, or is it merely something that is not explained to the viewer, but you just kind of get them to think in a very subtle way?
I think in general we prefer sort of a very open presentation of work. We're not really people who tell people what to think. We sort of put it out there, and I think maybe everybody walks away with an entirely different
perception of
of it, or something. Yeah, it just opens a completely different train of
I'm Conny Freyer. I'm one of the 3 artists from Troika, and you are watching the interview.
Given that you are now here in Korea, and I gather this is your first time in Korea, I'm curious what your impressions of Korea is. Not necessarily the cosmology that Koreans believe, but that might also be something that you would be interested to maybe learn as you're here, or maybe you already have. What's your impression of Korea?
It's a fantastic country. I'm very surprised because I came, we didn't really know about it at all. You know, we have like few experience, but of course being in the country is the first time. So I guess we came with like hopefully an empty cup and try to understand you know, and try to feel how it feels. And we've had only a few, you know, hours, a couple of days to go around and see things, but our kind of first impression is I found it very interesting, because you're like it's a bit like in between in terms of development between China and Japan, and he has a lot of things that it seems to me that is best of both worlds, in the sense that there's still like the life, the excitement, and the kind of, you know, like the kind of feeling that everything is possible. Very much like you have like in like big Chinese megalopolis like Shanghai or Beijing, and at the same time you have a refinement that is like definitely like or like you're attaching an importance to culture that is like very important. So everything has like loads of detail, loads of little very sweet and curated things. Very interesting.
Given that you're now here in Korea and many new viewers and appreciators of your work are going to be coming and taking a look, do you anticipate a certain kind of reaction because you've seen and met with some Koreans already? I'm just curious what you expect by having your exhibition here.
Well, I hope, of course, the reactions will be positive. Maybe critical is also good sometimes. But I also hope that, I know that people like to be connected in Korea and like their iPads. So I hope that visitors to this exhibition will also give the work some space, and before Googling or looking up what the pieces, how they're made, what they're about, to maybe just experience them first and take a bit of time.
And without a camera, it's important. Not looking through a camera at the work. It's very, very, very important.
No, why do you say that?
Because like this is a tendency that you see like in not only in Korea but in many museums worldwide, where you have like a constant digital interface in front of you, that you're taking picture for remembrance, but you don't even give the chance to, you know, the work without this mediation. And none of this work has been made for, you know, for that. They're made to be experienced in first, you know, in first instance, with no mediation in between.
I think we have been given, each of us, I think, in different colleges, a couple of lectures this week, and I think what was really nice for each of us was that, and I find that very different to Europe in particular, that actually all the students were actually asking questions.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's something you don't, I don't know why, but you don't get it that much in Europe, and I really enjoyed that. And they were actually good questions. So I hope that, I mean, I understand that maybe, you know, the average visitor might not, you know, be of that inquisitive mind. But if people go with that sort of mindset here, I think they will discover some really interesting things in the show. And for me personally, that would also be, yeah, I would be very happy with that.
I'm sure that doing the lectures gives you kind of an opportunity to meet your fans and future fans of your work, and just help them to know more about who you all are and what you're thinking behind this, but also because they haven't seen your work up close, it gives them a really wonderful chance to just experience that. And I'm curious if you have any advice for those who are coming to see your exhibition. If you could, you know, give kind of a couple of tips as to maybe what favorites you have here that you might want them to absolutely see.
This is a very difficult question. It's like which of your sons and daughters you prefer. You know, it's it's a difficult one. You know, they all have different character. Just hope, like, you know, as Conny said, that they come and live the chance to see how they react and be curious enough to inquire about what is behind it. And the staff of the museum have done like an incredible amount of work in order to do that. If it's, you know, like if that's what they request, you know, you can take the guide, you can talk to the people here. We've spent a lot of time explaining, you know, like other layers behind the work. So everything is kind of available. But I hope they leave the chance to look at it and just
Your exhibition,
see how they feel themselves, you know, for themselves is important.
There are a couple of time-based pieces in the exhibition, but even the pieces that are not time-based, I think require some time to really go beyond the initial, the visual first impression. So sure, that would be great.
Great. Last but not least, what does art mean to you?
Just a way of explaining the world to myself and others.
It's a way of life, I think. That's who we are, what we do, and no more, no less, in a way.
Yeah, it's a way of life, and asking questions and trying to find the answers to these questions.
Well, I hope that during your career that you will not only be able to continue to ask questions, but really get the answers that you've been searching for. And thank you again so much for giving your time to the interview and to our audience in 188 countries. I'm sure that just even based on what you've said and shown through our show today, that a lot of people might even come and kind of take a look at you all. So thank you so much again for being with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to meet you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.